Thank you very much. My name is Clodagh Rice, and I'm here to start the next portion of this evening, which is called The Great Business Debate. So basically, to give you an idea of the setup, we have political representatives here from the 5 main parties looking to set out their economic priorities in the run-up to the general election. And we have plenty to talk about, but I'm going to have to be very strict with my timing. And Anthea has actually armed me with a bell. So I do mean it. I will be very strict with all my timings. So can I please ask all of our political representatives to come up on stage? I'll invite you up in alphabetical order, please. Mark Durkin from the SDLP. Stephen Farry from the Alliance Party. Martin O'Muller from Sinn Féin. I think Martin's down the back somewhere. You might need a wee bit more time to get up here. Where is he? Gavin Robinson from the DUP. And last but certainly not least, Steve Aiken from the Ulster Unionists. Okay, so now that we're all here, basically we're going to go party at a time. Each representative will have exactly 4 minutes to set out their stall in terms of their economic priorities and their ambitions in the run-up to the general election. And I'm going to be very strict in my timings. You've been warned, I have a bell. So without further ado then, Mark, if you'd like to kick us off, I will stand aside here if you want to make your way up here.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, 4 minutes. People say I can't do anything in 4 minutes. Nick Clegg was once meant to have said in Downing Street that he could listen to me all day, and somebody said, you obviously have never had to. In terms of setting out economic priorities, I think the real issue at this stage that we all have to address are the implications of Brexit. I'm not going to go through all of the rhetoric about a hard Brexit. The fact is, the character and nature and pace of Brexit is something that really worries me. We need to get a handle on it as a region, and we can't do that unless we have our own institutions up and running. So whatever else happens after this election, I do want to see us make a success of the talks window that is there until the end of June, and certainly that's one of the messages that we will be mounting in this campaign. In terms of what are our practical options in relation to the Brexit issue, obviously as someone who was very closely involved in negotiating and even writing parts of the Good Friday Agreement, I worry about Brexit's implications for the agreement and what it can offer. But at a more positive level, when I consider all of the other challenges and the difficulties that Brexit is going to pose for sector after sector and for different localities and not just in border areas, I actually recognise that the agreement isn't just valuable furniture that needs to be protected or a precious ornament. It actually gives us the machinery that we need to answer a lot of those Brexit questions. The fact is, because the Good Friday Agreement puts us in a distinctive position from anywhere else in the UK as far as the framework for future relations with the EU is concerned, that is an advantage. The fact that it gives us a unique ambit in terms of Strand 2 that allows us to agree different areas of cooperation and joint implementation on an island basis where we can be treated as a single market for the purposes of those sectors, that gives us an opportunity for the North to be treated on a lean-to basis with the South by the EU in lots of areas, if the UK government, the Irish government and the EU agree that. Given that they all say that they're committed to respecting this common travel area and the Good Friday Agreement, let's have the common travel area and the Good Friday Agreement as named features in the framework for future relations between the EU and the UK. And let us use machinery not just in Strand 2 but also Strand 3. The British and Irish governments can meet in a British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference to deal with non-devolved matters, which will include some of the complicated issues that arise with Brexit, like movement of people, like customs issues or whatever. But of course that British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference can also take in devolved ministers to deal with any of the matters that touch on them as well. So that would give a restored executive a powerful trilateral role in those negotiations that would probably be far more valuable than the limited input that we're having in the Joint Ministerial Committee on European Negotiations in London. So we can use the agreement creatively to answer a lot of the problems that people in this room have identified when you have taken part in the Taoiseach's civic dialogue and when you've taken part in other seminars in relation to Brexit. So use the machinery of the agreement to give us answers on those problems. And then we also need to use this election to address all of the other issues that are there in terms of skills, in terms of the opportunities that can come from Westminster around city deals and regional growth deals. I don't know why the executive for years has refused to engage in that agenda, pretending that it was only for English cities, not getting in on the Act when Scotland and Wales were doing it, ignoring all of the proposals. We've now gone past a point where we probably won't get the maximum value that we should have been able to get out of city and regional growth deals, but we still need to do it, and we need to use the next circumstances to do it. And one of the other points that we need to bear down on the British government on is the loans to Ireland, in terms of as an answer to some of the Brexit challenges. The loans to Ireland, 3.1 billion. The sum is meant to be repaid in 2021. Currently, interest has been paid at up to £50 million every June and every December. We should be asking for that money to be earmarked and streamed so that it can support spending in the north, spending on a north-south basis and spending on an east-west basis to replace the loss of monies that we will get from the EU.
I'm going to have to use my bell already. Thank you, guys. Mr. Farry, you're up next.
Thank you very much, Clodagh, and good evening, everyone. The bell's actually at my feet, so Clodagh's going to fight me for it in a few minutes' time. Well, this is a great opportunity to have, I think, a fairly frank discussion about some of the economic challenges that are facing Northern Ireland at present. And I suppose, like Mark, I am going to focus to a certain extent on Brexit, because I do think it is by far the most imminent issue that is facing us all, and it is a particular challenge in Northern Ireland above and beyond the challenge that's been faced by the UK as a whole, and indeed the challenge that is faced by the Republic of Ireland as a consequence of Brexit, and indeed the European Union as a whole. But before getting there, I think it's useful to start somewhat on a positive note and to recognise where we're actually coming from over the past number of years, where we have seen the Northern Ireland economy growing in a very impressive way, and we've heard indeed a number of testimonials tonight already in terms of some of the success stories that we've had, and how in particular through using a strong skills base, albeit one that does have its own challenges and indeed threats. Today we have become a major centre for inward investment, and in some particular areas a very successful area for inward investment. And on the other side of the coin as well, we have seen major progress in terms of bringing down unemployment, and indeed our economic activity figures, while still the worst in the UK as a whole, are now actually almost at a record low since records were actually took over the past 30, 40 years. So in that sense, we have seen some good progress recently. Today, however, we have to first of all recognise the challenges posed by the ongoing political impasse. Northern Ireland does need a government. Political stability is important in terms of providing economic stability and providing a good business environment, but it's also important that we have local decision-making around the economy, because there are factors and issues here that are different from what would be a focus primarily on the greater southeast of England in the context of direct rule. So the continuation of devolution, I think, is critically important for business. Also, the political impasse sees a lot of important decisions being put on the back burner. And I'm particularly conscious, being a former Minister for Employment and Learning, that some of our initiatives around skills are being stalled. We're looking across the water and seeing fresh industrial strategies. I know we've had our own recent consultation document, but they're ahead of us. They have a very strong focus around productivity, new interventions around skills, what they're doing around the apprenticeship levy. So there's a whole host of things that are backing up in terms of Northern Ireland, which we do need to get our heads around urgently. But that does bring me to the challenge in relation to Brexit. For us, Brexit, I think, is a negative for the UK as a whole. We're all going to be diminished as a consequence of that. And Brexit, in many ways, whether we're talking politically or economically, is about erecting barriers in the context where we should be maximising the flow of ideas, the movement of people, the investment flow, movement of capital, services and goods. So it does provide its particular challenges. I think ideally we would like to see the softest possible Brexit for the UK as a whole, which does mean potentially staying inside the single market or staying inside the customs union. But looking to Northern Ireland, we do need our own special deal. Now for us, we need to decouple talk of a special deal from the politics. This has to be a very pragmatic response to the situation we find ourselves in, and something that can unite people from right across the political spectrum through a very clear acknowledgement of what are the very particular economic and other challenges being faced by the region. And I think ideally what we would like to see is the potential for some workaround in terms of the customs union and some means by which Northern Ireland can stay part of the single market, and in essence perhaps become part of the European Economic Area, a model something akin to Norway. Whenever we are looking to what is our best economic orientation, there is a clear trade-off being forced upon us in terms of looking to the north-south axis and onwards into Europe and the maintenance of the east-west axis. And in some ways, there will always be winners and losers depending upon how you draw those lines. So we do need to be creative in that regard. But overall, I think that type of approach is something that's going to be fundamental to us. But notwithstanding what happens with Brexit, we do need to get on with all the investments around skills and to improve the productivity gap, which is our long-standing structural economic challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Martin Miller. I'm going to take my bell over here, just in case.
You don't need that bell. I note that David Sterling is at table 1 and I'm at table 56. And that message has been received loud and clear about getting our act together. I'm here in my best suit because earlier tonight I was at the selection convention for Sinn Féin in South Belfast, and I was thinking of wearing a tuxedo, but I didn't think it was exactly the man of the people image that Sinn Féin needed, so I was in my best suit, and it worked out okay. The strategy worked okay because I'm now the candidate. I want to bring you 3 messages which I hope are linked to economics, but economics is linked to everything. The first message is, of course, about Brexit, that it is my intention, it's our resolve to continue to campaign against the lunacy of Brexit, to campaign against the dire results which will come from Brexit and will come from a hard border again on this island. It is my view that it's absolutely essential that at the end of the Brexit negotiation, not only do we have that designated special status, we remain within the EU, but that we have access to all the other markets in the EU, of course, that we have the freedom of movement of people. And I say that in relation to freedom of movement of people and put emphasis on that, not to underestimate all the importance of the 4 freedoms, because I want to continue to see people of great talent and ability, people of determination, people with entrepreneurial skills coming to this part of our country. I want to see them contributing to our society, and I think in particular of some of the wonderful people who have come to the 2 universities, the 2 big universities in Belfast in recent times, and who have contributed enormously to this land and to our peace process. So that's the first message. It is certainly to pledge that we will continue to work against Brexit. And someone said to me today, "But sure, it'll never work. It can never happen." And then I watched the news tonight, and I saw wonderful things on the news that I thought we would never ever see, great moments of reconciliation and peace building and bridge building. So I do believe that we can win that special status. The second message is one of a commitment here tonight, a pledge that we will work until we restore the institutions, that is our job. I have spent enough time in Stormont in recent years and in Belfast City Hall in a previous lifetime to understand the importance, not only for business, although that's absolutely crucial, but for the peace process, for progress, for our children, for our grandchildren, that we make a success of what we are trying to do at Stormont. That's a big challenge. That's an Everest to climb. But the pledge I make tonight is we'll continue to do that until we get it right, until we can deliver to you a government of which you can be very, very proud. The last thing I want to say, I'm going to donate 30 seconds to Steve Aiken, so I am of my time. The last thing I want to say is I want to commend and applaud those companies who are here tonight, especially who have come from abroad to invest here, companies that are making Belfast great. And I want to thank other businesses who have made them welcome. And I'm thinking, of course, of the superstars of City, of Tyco, of Allstate, of Liberty, of Concentrix, but many other smaller companies as well who have come, especially in the Cathedral Quarter and in the Belfast City Centre in recent times. We commend you for investing here, but we're going to make your investment an absolute success in the time ahead, so that you will redouble, you'll be proud ambassador for what we have created here in the time ahead. So thank you for investing here. And at that, I usually say at this point, thank you, but in the time it's in it, I'm going to say, Gura Maithagh. Thank you.
I would just like to point out that while that is a very generous offer, Martin, I'm afraid I can't bend the rules for anyone. Apologies, Steve, but if you'd like to come up next.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for inviting me here this evening. You might have noticed that I'm slightly taller than our party leader, Robert Swan, but I hope I'll be able to sort of say a few words. And I think from the economic perspective for us, there's three key messages. The first one, and I want to hear loud and clear, is we need the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly back up and running. We have got to have confidence. We have got to have confidence back in Northern Ireland so that you can all do what you do best, which is invest in Northern Ireland, invest in our people, and make our economy grow. For the economy, I want it quite simple, and it's quite simple. We would call it 2-20-22. I want to see 2% growth of GDP in Northern Ireland per annum every year. I want to see everybody built around that. I want to see our senior civil servants, our Invest NI, and our politicians' wages and delivery based around the fact that we're going to have to deliver 2% of GDP every year. I want to see manufacturing in Northern Ireland grow to 20%. We're good at making stuff. Let's make stuff and let's continue to do that and do that well. I want to see our exports grow. I want us to see us exporting 20 billion a year out of Northern Ireland. We can do that. We can do that in goods, we can do that in services, but that can be transformational and that can improve our people's perception of where we need to go to. And the final two, as I was going to say, was going to be moving into our second century. But more important, David, it's about the 2 million people who will be living in Northern Ireland here in 2050 or maybe more. We need to make this a country where they're proud to live in. It's a place where they've got good outcomes, they've got a good economy, they've got good education, they've got good healthcare, and above all, they want to be here. We need to stop this drain of exporting 37% of our best and brightest every year who go away and don't come back. We want the people to be here. I want lots of companies to invest here. I want us to be the global centre in cybersecurity. I want us to be the leading sector in the creative industries. We can do it again. And to do that, we must do one thing. We must invest heavily in our research and development, and that means we must invest heavily in our universities. We're the only part of the United Kingdom that is disinvesting in our universities. We must invest heavily in our universities, and that is one of the biggest things we need to do. And finally, Brexit. Most of you know me from many guises that have gone back for years, from being the Chief Executive of the British Irish Chamber of Commerce. And I have always said the one thing that would be the worst thing that happened to these islands would be Brexit. I was a Remainer, but the vote has been taken, the United Kingdom is leaving, so we've got to get on with it and get the best deal possible. And we've got to do that by working, getting the executive back up and running, and we need to make sure that our voice is being heard. Our voice is being heard in London, our voice is being heard in Edinburgh, Cardiff, Dublin, Brussels, and globally. That's what we must be able to do, and that's what I want us to get on and doing. So there we go. That's the three things, and I think that's slightly less than 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good job. Very impressed with her timing so far. And last but not least, Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Clodagh, and good evening to you all. And thank you so much for the warm invitation, I should say, to CBI, but thank you first to Bombardier from my constituency for the fantastic welcome they've given me at their table. I suppose, like me, all of you rushed home from work, put on your glad rags, or in Martin's case, his dapper suit, rushed down here, and were delightedly looking forward to an evening thinking, thank goodness I'm going to miss the view. And then we came along and spoiled your night for you. It is an important time. It is an important time for our economy and our region. It would be easy for me to stand here and say, look, the Northern Ireland economy is doing well. Our exports up again this year, 6%. Our manufacturing up again this year, 6%. Wage growth for full-time employed individuals up 2 percentage points in the last 2 years. 42,500 new jobs created in Northern Ireland over the last 5 years of devolved government. But there's no point in me telling you that, because you're the people who delivered it. And so tonight I want to stand here first and foremost and congratulate each and every one of you, captains of industry, business leaders, people who make our society tick, because you are the people that succeed for this country and for this economy. And whilst there are challenges, and those challenges have been rehearsed over speech, over speech, over speech, it's your resilience that you have demonstrated over decades in Northern Ireland, your ingenuity and your adaptability that prove why we can and will continue to succeed. So in this election, you're going to hear an awful lot of promises from politicians. But I think it is time that we recognise that the key goal that was articulated by you in the business community for the introduction of corporation tax, that we recognise that without a devolved government, it simply cannot happen. That huge game changer, that's something that you've been working toward and recognise the benefits for your company, your firms and your industries, it cannot happen without devolved government. And I don't think anyone here would stand and try to pretend that Northern Ireland would be a better place without it. Perhaps a crisis shows us in Northern Ireland just what it is we have, and when things are going well, we need to grasp them and hold on to them. I was delighted to hear David earlier refer to Richard Florida and his 3 T's of technology and talent and third one, tolerance. You see, I didn't forget it, but it is the important one that I want to talk about. I referred to Richard Florida whenever I became the Lord Mayor of Belfast and referenced exactly the same 3T programme that he outlined. Tolerance, to my mind, doesn't cut it. Tolerance is about what we as a society are prepared to put up with. It's like a pain threshold. It takes you so far, but if we're really going to do this, then we need to go much farther than tolerance. When we talk of technology, it's easy to stand up as a politician and say Northern Ireland has the Kelvin connection, isn't that wonderful? But I remember talking to Colin from 16 South when I was Lord Mayor. The cost of that is huge. The benefits are spectacular, but the cost of connectivity is huge. We can talk about what we've achieved in technological advances in this country, but unless we make it more meaningful, and that those of you in this room that haven't been able to access it can and reap the benefits, then we're never going to succeed. And if we don't start delivering on the North-South Interconnector, we don't start delivering on energy, and we don't deliver on skills, if we stop talking and don't start delivering, then we will never succeed for this province. So to all of you who have led the way in industry, to all of you who lead the way day and daily in creating for this society, for producing opportunity for this society, and for continuing to make us tick, thank you. Make sure that you engage with us. Make sure you continue to make sure politicians are not an inhibitor, but an enabler for success in this society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. I kind of just wanted to go with the bell, but
3.5 minutes.
it was 4 spot on, but thank you very much for sticking to all of those timings. So now that's kind of the part that politicians always quite enjoy, getting to set out their stall, but we're going to mix it up a little bit and turn the tables on them. Because we've received some questions from CBI members that I'm now going to put to all 5 representatives, and I think you do have microphones there. We're just getting mic'd up here? Great. Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask is, I'll direct this first of all, we'll maybe start in the same order. So, Mr. Durkin, how do you intend to address the skills gap in Northern Ireland? And in particular, do you think that the money being paid by the apprenticeship levy should be directly given back to companies for training purposes?
Well, the apprenticeship levy should be used for what its name suggests it's meant to be used for, so it should be put back into making sure that we do more in relation to the skills challenge here, and particularly support the people who are best placed to do more in terms of the skills challenge, and that is companies and employers themselves. Yes, we need to do more with our FE colleges and with the universities as well. we're not alone in having that challenge. You only have to listen to the debate in the South at the minute about dropout rates from universities and the challenges there, and the fact that companies there are saying increasingly that the people they're getting are not job ready in the way they want to be. So it is not exclusively a problem of our own, but we do need to recognise, if we are going to talk about more employer-led solutions, that we need to make sure that the levy isn't just another way of extracting money out of companies and also out of here, because there's a question about how much of that spending is properly attributive. So we need to follow that. But we also need to recognise, as someone who represents an area of high unemployment, just relying on employment-led answers isn't going to be enough. We need other solutions.
I'm afraid this part is even stricter. You've only got 1 minute. Mr. Farry, in terms of your thoughts on the skills gap here, and specifically the apprenticeship levy.
Okay, we're starting at the end with the levy. At present, the levy is simply just a tax on business in Northern Ireland. The proceeds are entirely being used just to further balance the books in terms of our own budget. So I think there is a legitimate complaint from business that there should be an expectation of that money being reinvested. That said, the levy itself is a very inefficient way of doing that redistribution. In terms of the wider skills issues, as part of my legacy as Minister for Employment and Learning, I'd like to think we have a whole range of policies and programmes in place, from a new strategy on apprenticeships, youth training, a new strategy for further education. We've done a lot of investment, particularly in the universities, particularly around the STEM agenda, but we're faced with two challenges. One is around funding, and in particular the funding challenge in universities is potentially as much as £90 million per year. We have to address that. If we don't, we will not be a competitive inward investment location for much longer. And secondly, we have to get on with implementation. The issue is not just about the pipeline coming through in terms of volume. It's also about matching skills, and careers advice in that regard is very, very important.
If you call me Mr., I'm going home.
Pardon?
If you call me Mr., I'm going home. You can call me Martin.
Okay, Martin, you've got a minute to go.
I think the apprenticeship levy is a three-card trick. I think it's a ruse. It amounts to a raid on our public services budget. It's a £30 million going out in this tax and apprenticeship levy from our education department, from our economy department, from our hospitals, and so on. I have great sympathy for those that are paying this, and many of them are here tonight, are paying an additional tax, but it is just that. It will have no effect on the block grant. There will be no addition to the block grant, so there's no extra money. That's number one. Number two, we need to focus on skills. We're going to close the productivity gap. We have to close it by focusing on skills. And in particular, the greatest challenge for us, and I mentioned the city of Belfast, the greatest challenge in the city of Belfast is to close this gap where we still have large numbers of young men and women from hard-pressed areas like Sandy Road and New Lodge left behind. We haven't managed to crack that yet. We need to make sure we focus our resources on doing that, closing that gap in the jobs, creating the jobs as well, but giving skills and hope to young people.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you very much. Steve Aiken, your thoughts on how do you address the skills gap and specifically the apprenticeship levy?
First of all, the apprenticeship levy. The big issue with the apprenticeship levy is, for many of our companies, including in the construction industry, they're being taxed twice. And with the problems in Northern Ireland, with issues with planning, with issues of trying to get contracts, with trying to get infrastructure built, if they're based with the fact that I would be rather based in England, where I can get easy planning, I can get easy contracts, I can get much better delivery, and if I have to pay a levy on apprenticeships, I'll actually get training in England delivered directly to me. That's a real problem we have in Northern Ireland. Regardless, and I hear what Martin says, regardless of that, we should be using the money from the apprenticeship levy for training apprentices. That's what it's for. That's what we should be doing. And the skills base is key. That's the one thing I think we need to be doing about. We need to be investing in our universities. We can't allow our universities to keep on dropping down the global rankings table. We can't do that. That sends a very bad message about Northern Ireland PLC, and we need to sort that out.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, again, Mr. Robinson.
Or Gavin. Well, you've heard four answers, none of which I can add much more to, I have to say. But on skills, I think it's very important, when I mentioned earlier, your ingenuity and your adaptability about identifying the skills that we need. Again, you hear the same mantra, you'll hear the same talk, and the same skill set requirements. But you know that they change. You know that at times you are able to satisfy demands and at other times you can't. And so the adaptability in skills, I think, is crucially important. And when it comes to the apprenticeship levy, then yes, absolutely, it should be used. Again, where the opportunities arise and when the need is there, then it should be used from Northern Ireland firms, by Northern Ireland firms in Northern Ireland.
Great. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the second question. And it's focusing on infrastructure, which obviously infrastructure projects affect so many different sectors of the economy. And we'll maybe do the round the houses starting from this end this time. So, I mean, specifically, what more does your party think could be done to address the lack of infrastructure spending? And how could we overcome difficulties in areas like finance and planning?
Planning has had a significant change, as you know, and in the last number of years, I haven't seen it get much better, although there appears to be a resolve, and you'll hear very often that the councils are doing their best. When we had the economic downturn in 2007, planning service was completely raided. The numbers that were working in planning service in 2007 to when powers transferred in 2014 were almost halved. So when councils got the powers and got the resource is 50% of what it had been only 7 years ago, and that is causing a huge problem for throughput of applications and ideas right across the province. So it is a problem, and it's something that needs to be addressed. In infrastructure, we famously proposed that there should be a tunnel that goes between Belfast and Scotland. But 8 years ago, whenever I joined Belfast City Council, York Interchange, the York Street Interchange was a hugely significant and important infrastructural project that was to be delivered for £70 million. It's now well over 100 million. The traffic is still at gridlock. People cannot move their freight. Workers cannot move freely between the city. Those are the big infrastructural changes, alongside North-South, of course, and interconnector, which need to be delivered and delivered quickly.
Leave it there. Thank you very much. Mr. Aiken?
Infrastructure, simple. I'm from South Antrim. Build me a dual carriageway road to my Belfast International Airport so I can compete directly with Dublin Airport. That's the first thing I want. Second thing I want is York Street Interchange. And the third thing, we must build the North-South Interconnector. We need to send a very strong message about trying to get this island working when we're moving into the post-Brexit scenario. And we need a physical manifestation of it. And what we need right now is to get on with building the North-South Interconnector. And that's key to what we need to do.
You're going to call me Mr.?
Martin?
No. Lovely. In terms of lending or borrowing, also in Table 56 is Judith Totten from Upstream Financial. You've got to go down that far and talk to her about borrowing some money. In terms of infrastructure, we have 13% extra in the capital budget between now and 2021. We need to get an executive together which can spend that. I went up to the funeral of Martin McGuinness in Derry. A friend from California said to me, "Why aren't we on the main road to Derry?" And that needs repaired. And of course, you know, we really desperately need to invest in university infrastructure in the city of Derry as well. But we need the basics done, and we need to get our act together and get it done.
Mr. Farry?
Yeah, I concur with a lot of the points made. I mean, I would add to the point around university investment. We have a lot of FE college investment that's still in the pipeline, which we need to bring forward. In terms of energy, again, the North-South interconnector is vital, but there's wider capital investment in the energy infrastructure required if Northern Ireland is to remain competitive, and we need to keep our eye on that in particular as well. I think York Street Interchange probably is the most important and critical issue, and I would even include things around D Street and the Sydenham bypass in terms of access to Titanic water, if that indeed is also to become part of the investment. And being slightly controversial, there's a lot of talk about spreading things out across Northern Ireland, which we do need to do in some respects, but equally Belfast as a city is not yet at its full capacity, and it is the city of Belfast ultimately that will drive the Northern Ireland economy as a whole, and we need to ensure that we don't worry so much about how we slice the cake up, but we need to focus on how actually we maximise the growth for Northern Ireland as a whole, and that's through the Belfast city region. Conscious of Mark's about to speak next.
Going to have to leave it there, yes. And last but not least, Mr. Durkin, your thoughts on infrastructure and specifically any overcoming difficulties in planning and finance?
Well, first of all, as the experience of the South shows us, relying on corporation tax alone isn't going to be enough. Skills and higher education is hugely important, and infrastructure is all important. In terms of taking forward hard and soft infrastructure, obviously, we need to ramp up our financing. We also need to improve our performance. That's something we tried to do way back years ago when I was a minister, and we negotiated the borrowing power and the reinvestment and reform initiative, created the basis for the investment strategy for Northern Ireland. But I don't think we've actually managed that in the way that we need to do. The idea that I suggested as well about the loans to Ireland money, the 3.1 billion, we should be using that money to essentially create structural funds for this island. use that model of European funding structures and apply it here, that we can use it on a north-south basis and on an east-west. That's what will support infrastructure here in the north and the all-island infrastructure that we need to take us forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Plenty of food for thought there. Now, one topic that certainly will interest everyone, corporation tax, and the issue that we've been hearing a lot of talk that it would be coming in 2018, but with that looking increasingly unlikely, how else does your party plan to create 50,000 jobs over the next 5 years? We'll maybe start with Mr. Robinson.
Thanks. We're not going to give up on the devolution of corporation tax. Others, of course, have talked about it only being doable if it is financially affordable. I remember whenever we were in the discussions about whether we should have corporation tax devolve to Northern Ireland at all, there were others who thought this isn't the game changer that it really is. And I think it's important that we pursue it. It's important that we push through with it. And most importantly of all, the argument has been won to the extent that the UK government have lowered their overall rate of corporation tax, therefore making it cheaper for Northern Ireland. The one thing it's predicated upon is the need through the Azores judgment to have devolved government. And that is something that I do trust and hope we will have in the months to come.
Okay, Mr. Aiken?
Just call me Steve.
Steve.
We need to get on with it. We've heard Mr. Trump indicating quite clearly that the US is heading towards 15% corporation tax. The UK, it will probably be heading towards 15% corporation tax fairly quickly as well. We need to get on with it, and we need to get the Northern Ireland Executive back up and running, and we need to get the Assembly back up and running as quickly as we can, and we need to get on with it. We can't hang around. I was part of the original Grow NI movement when we were looking at corporation tax way back in 2011 and even before that. And here we are now, we're still talking about it. Our advantage has been dissipated away. UK will be at, I would imagine, will be at 15% soon. We need to get on with it. We need to get moving.
Well, I think that we're going to have to make our peace with this all-island economy, which we have not developed, which is, if anything, has gone backwards. The whole vision of Sir George Quigley of having one island economy, which would be the envy of Europe, which would be the envy of the world. I am convinced, sadly, that if we continue on the path that we are set, that no matter how many strategies we have or how many plans we have, no matter how many launches we do of those plans, that we're not going to close that productivity gap, that we're not going to create 50,000 sustainable jobs that people would really fight to get into. We're not going to attract the talent. So even setting Brexit aside, we need to find a way, and I see IBAC and CBI, perhaps more than anyone else on the island, talking about developing infrastructure on an all-island basis. But for us to enjoy some of the bounty, which is clearly south of the border, despite their many problems, in terms of foreign direct investment, we're going to have to make peace with this all-island economy strategy.
Great.
So we certainly continue to support the aim of a lower corporation tax rate for Northern Ireland, but it can't happen in a vacuum. We need to be very conscious that we need to invest in infrastructure, and in particular we need to invest in skills. We can't raise the expectations of a good investment location if we can't actually meet the potential demand that can be attracted into Northern Ireland. Perhaps even more fundamental, lower rate of corporation tax will allow us to shift to a much stronger focus in terms of attracting profit centres into Northern Ireland, and by definition there'll be much more focus in terms of sales. And so I think a lower rate of corporation tax to a large extent does go hand in hand to what is going to happen in terms of Brexit and what is going to be our future trading relationship and our access or indeed participation in the single market and customs union.
Yeah, go ahead.
Whenever I've been lobbying over the past number of years in relation to city deal and enterprise zone opportunities that George Osborne kept saying were there for the asking of the executive would ask, I was being told by ministers, we can't ask for anything else because we're concentrating on getting corporation tax. I don't think we had to focus exclusively on corporation tax and not look for other things as well. As I've said already, alongside corporation tax, we do need to do more in terms of infrastructure and also on skills. In terms of corporation tax too, it's not just the challenge of getting our own institutions up and running. We do also face the small print of the Treasury are saying they will give us the power when they are satisfied that we have a balanced and sustainable budget. And the Chief Secretary of the Treasury has made it very clear that a budget is made of the sum of its parts, and the Treasury will choose to squeeze us on any aspect of budget issues as well. So we need to be ready to confront some of the budget choices that we're possibly going to have to make sure that we get that power triggered.
Okay. Now, next up, a topic that certainly pretty much everyone has spoken about so far, and I'm sure many of you have been discussing at your tables, Brexit. And how specifically, we'll start maybe on this side, how does your party think that Northern Ireland can make an economic success of Brexit? And Mr. Robinson, your party is campaigning to leave.
Yeah, our party made a recommendation, as everyone knows, that it would be in Northern Ireland's interest, the United Kingdom's interest as a whole, to leave the European Union. And those are arguments for last year. But we are where we are, and whether you were pro-leave or pro-remain, I think it is important that collectively we not only maturely and pragmatically identify what the issues are going to be for Northern Ireland, and we did a lot of that preparatory work in Westminster in the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee in advance of the decision on 23rd June last year, that we recognise what those challenges are, and collectively we find the solutions to deal with them. We saw one glimmer of hope when the First and Deputy First Minister, as was then, were able to write collectively to Prime Minister, and it had an impact. It had an impact that people have recognised, and you hear it coming from the European Commission, you hear it coming from other key players in this negotiation, that Northern Ireland's issues in relationship with the Republic of Ireland actually do matter and will be taken seriously. But unless we can get around the table and collectively decide not only the issues, but the solutions, we'll not find a resolution.
Okay, Mr. Aiken, how do the Ulster Unionists plan to make an economic success of Brexit?
Well, we as a party were one of the first people to bring out a vision paper for what Northern Ireland outside the EU would look like. And for us, the main thing is to break down the barriers, to make sure there are no hard borders. There's no borders north or south, or there's no borders east or west. And one of the things that we're concentrating on is getting both the British and Irish governments to think about getting an international treaty to deal with what we call the modalities. And as anybody who's been involved in trade, everybody understands the big issues, but the small bits, the things about veterinary rules, the issues with energy, the issues with lorries travelling back and forth across borders, all those things need to be sorted if we are to minimise the impact that we have. And we need to avoid the impact, because the one thing is the €1 billion a week trade that goes back and forth across the Irish Sea. We need to be able to ensure that all these islands' economic success retains and continues to grow. And more importantly than that, Northern Ireland needs to be a very key part of that success story.
Okay, I can't help but think that Sinn Féin's position might be slightly different on this question.
It could have changed under, since I come under such some positive solutions from Gavin and Steve. I think we can't. At a wonderful evening in Kilkeel with Sir Richard Needham and the fishermen off Kilkeel, all their crew are Lithuanian, and of course they all voted to leave. We talked about that contradiction. I've spent quite a few years going to the States telling people that they need to invest here, what a wonderful proposition we have. But of course you have access to the other 27 countries and regions in the EU. And of course that has turned to dust. We can't say that anymore. And yet that was a really key part, in my view, of our proposition, and actually a key part of why people from abroad invested here. We are facing into a cul-de-sac. We need to find a way out of it, but there will not be an economically successful Brexit unless we change it irrevocably and we recast it as a status for this part of the island, for the north, which gives us the benefits of remaining in the EU. Otherwise, I'm afraid, I usually ban the word can't, but I'm afraid this one I'm saying we can't.
I'm going to have to ring my bell again. Now, Mr. Farrell, what about the Alliance Party position? How do you think we can make an economic success of Brexit in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think first of all, we do need a special deal for Northern Ireland. If we don't have a special deal, I have to say there's a very real danger of economic stagnation in this region, where we become very peripheral. On the other hand, if we do get a special deal, then perhaps new opportunities may open up, particularly if we have a slightly easier access to the European Union than other parts of the UK, and are able to build links, particularly on a north-south basis. So that may well be part and parcel of our economic future. We do need to be very conscious of the need for an executive in place to make the case. and for two reasons. First of all, we have seen a number of leading European figures, such as Angela Merkel, Michel Barnier, who's the chief negotiator, and Guy Verhofstadt from the European Parliament, all expressing an understanding of the particular concerns facing Northern Ireland. So that message is getting out there. We have friends in Europe. Equally, they want to address the Irish issues in the latter half of this year as part of the early phase of the Article 15 negotiations. So the door is open, but we have to walk through that door very quickly, and that means we have to have an executive with a proper plan.
We'll have to leave it there. And last but not least, Mr. Durkin, what's the SDLP's plan in order to try and make an economic success?
Well, obviously, we have to tell those who advocated leave that success isn't going to be automatic. Those of us who voted to remain, we have to recognise that failure isn't inevitable. I don't play golf, but I know the rule is you have to play the ball where it lies. What would special status, what would a unique status look like? Actually, the full development of the Good Friday Agreement is what it would look like. That's a pre-existing international treaty supported by the EU. It recognises that in any sectors we agree on a north-south basis, we can deal with things on an all-island basis, and that could be supported and recognised by the EU. If the two governments are as committed as they say they are to that agreement and all its potentials, they should be able to agree that as well. We can look to the fact that Michel Barnier obviously has had experience and input here before. I negotiated with him in relation to the peace programmes and the other European funds at the time, and he is committed and ready, so we should be harnessing that goodwill all to the positive. If we're looking for the way of doing it, it's there in the Good Friday Agreement. If we will fully develop it, all we need to do is add the will.
Great. Just finished, just in the nick of time there. Now, our final question is a more open-ended one, and it can really be anything that you could think of as a party. If you had one key change in order to dramatically improve the Northern Ireland economy, what would it be? Mr. Durkin, do you want to start us off?
University expansion, not least obviously in relation to McGee and Derry, but to expand university and higher education capacity here. We shouldn't be exporting the equivalent of a campus every single year and not taking people back. So we should be doing that to improve our skills. Also, we should be identifying those skills, those talents, and we heard about them in the earlier panel tonight, that are here in business in so many ways. We should establish an open faculty for innovation that puts at a premium the talent and the capacity of people, not just in our universities, but in our further education colleges, but also in business. And that open faculty for innovation should be able to offer fellowships and network people, and not just who are here in the North, but people who want to support the North or from the North or want to give the North goodwill right across the world. And we use that as an asset in the context of the global challenges we face after Brexit.
What about the Alliance Party in terms of how they might dramatically improve the economy with just one change?
Okay, well, I would complement what Marcus said through saying that we need to have a much stronger focus in terms of the development of professional and technical skills through the apprenticeship approach. We can look elsewhere across the European Union and see very successful approaches towards apprenticeships and youth training, where they're much better in terms of matching the demand from employers in terms of the development of skills, right across skills from intermediate right through to higher level skills, and ensuring that young people are able to entry in terms of entry level skills as well, but backed up by strong careers advice. We have those economies have much lower levels of unemployment, including youth unemployment, and much higher levels of productivity and prosperity in those economies. So we'll focus on apprenticeships and development of the existing work we've done on strategies is absolutely critical to transform our skills landscape.
Very similar answers there. Or try not to maybe all say the same thing.
Yeah. Consensus is good.
So using all my diplomatic skills, which are meagre in the best of times, but I would turn it around. The progress we have made in this society, and I was in City Hall when it was a fairly dark place and it was a very tough time, a lot of heartache and hardship in this city and horror in this city. And I've seen the amazing progress made, absolute transformation in this city in the 30 years since I entered City Hall this year, in 1987. And it's due to the business community in large part. Great leadership, stern leadership, forward-looking, outward-looking, visionary. And you need to help us, in my view, continue that journey. And the one issue you need to lead on is the issue of marriage equality and LGBT issues. And I know our friends from abroad are red hot on that, but that's not where it is. We need the indigenous businesses to give politicians a little bit of advice and say, and there's all other issues, and I'm not even going to task you with those, but give us a bit of leadership to get that one sorted.
Okay, thank you very much. What about, get a bit of an applause there. Where do the Ulster Unionists stand on this then, Steve Aiken, in terms of if you had one key change that could dramatically affect the economy here?
Well, first of all, I'm going to agree with everything everybody else has said already. But
You're not allowed to do that, sorry.
One key change that we are beginning to talk, particularly with some of the other parties in GB, about as well. One of the things is we need to tell all our great EU citizens who are working here in Northern Ireland at the moment that we want them to stay, and we need them. One of the things we're working on is the idea that all EU citizens who have been in Northern Ireland for, let's say, 5 years and have paid income tax and national insurance, on the day that we leave the EU, we will grant them, if they want it, British citizenship. Because we will give them the option of staying here. Because we think we need to very clearly say to all those great people who keep our economy going, please stay, please be part of our success, and please work us going through in the future.
Okay, and last but not least, Mr. Robinson.
The digital infrastructure, I think we need to completely overhaul in this country. I sit on the British Infrastructure Group, and we've looked at broadband, for example, not just in the United Kingdom as a whole, but in Northern Ireland particularly. And you hear these figures of 96% coverage, and they're not coming to fruition. We know within our rural hinterlands and outside of our core dense city populations that broadband infrastructure, digital infrastructure, just clearly is not satisfying business needs, never mind domestic and personal use. When you purchase plans, whether it's on the high-tech Kelvin connections or whether it's for your home router, you will get an up-to figure, but you'll never get it. You'll never get that capacity, and whether so. If widespread international connections like Kelvin, as we've mentioned, whether it's home broadband speeds and the fiberglass connectivity, and whether it's cloud technology and more cabinets and developing that economy within our society as well, all of that I think will make a huge difference for our economy here.
Okay, well thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our questions, and I can just see Angela coming up here, so if I could just invite Angela on stage.
I was given 2 minutes to talk, but I think now I'll cut it down to 30 seconds, guys, because I know you're all very keen for your desserts. Well, I'd like to start the evening, or start by saying thank you to Clodagh and thank you to all our political guests for turning up here tonight to inform the business community about their economic policies and how they see them going forward. Political recognition of the importance of the business community is fundamental to any economy's success, and Northern Ireland is no different in that respect. So I am truly grateful that given the political impasse that we have at the moment, that each of these politicians sitting here tonight has demonstrated a willingness to engage with the business community on these very important topics. The present tonight reflects a recognition that their own political ambitions for Northern Ireland cannot be achieved without a proper partnership between government and the business community. So, ladies and gentlemen, each political party has set out their stall this evening, their views, their priorities for the economy. They've talked on those issues that are important to each and every one of you, to your employees, to your company boards, and for some of you, to your shareholders. So when you cast your vote on June the 8th, as all responsible citizens do, you'll be able to reflect on the promises and the pledges that you heard here tonight. And finally, I'd like to add one more comment before I stand between you and your desserts. CBI members and guests in this room tonight should be reminded that the CBI in Northern Ireland remains firmly committed to working with government on the critical issues of infrastructure, energy, education and skills. And we're also committed to devolved government. This audience knows better than anyone, a political vacuum comes with a very high economic price. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also be assured that at the CBI we will continue to work with all politicians right across the political spectrum for the good of Northern Ireland. We will ensure that the voice of business is heard loud and clear so that our economy is given the opportunity to thrive. So before you enjoy those desserts, can we one last time give a round of applause to Clodagh and our elected politicians.